You might remember us, the ones in the red shirts.
We can't afford guns being the leading cause of death for children and teens in this country.
Whether you're Republicans or Democrats, you can't look away.
We're not going to shut up until we get the change we deserve.
Thoughts and prayers are no longer enough. We need to take action now.
You didn't get this far by saying you can't. You didn't get this far by just being mediocre. You moms demand action, and that's what we demand.
Welcome to Movement Builders, a show about the people ending gun violence in America. All of us.
I'm Kaylin Ford.
And I'm Nikita McDaniel, and we are so excited to be here with y'all.
Yes, we've heard from so many incredible movement builders so far this season, and it's gotten us so fired up as we head into the home stretch of our 2024 elections work.
This is it. We are pulling out all of the stops to elect gun sense candidates up and down the ballot. And we've loved seeing the work that you're doing during our weekends of action and our 100 Days, 100 Ways challenge. Please keep those photos and videos and stories coming on social media. And don't forget to show us here on the podcast some love. Here's some of what you all have shared so far.
Hi there, it's Andrea from the student side. Just finished listening to the episode with the powerhouse mom and son, and I have to say that really resonated with me because my family is also involved. My sister and I are in the GVP space. She works in GVP in Miami, and it's just like incredible to see how much a family that works together can get accomplished, and it was just very inspiring. So love this episode.
Hi, this is Akash Sarath, and I am a senior organizing manager here on the national field team at Everytown for Gun Safety. I just finished listening to episode 5 with Chantel Rock and Rosha Henson, and I gotta say, this was one of the best episodes I've heard so far. Hearing their mother-son dynamic, trying to change the state of Virginia, both of them having run for office and what they've been doing for their community, it was just so inspiring and so incredible to see all the work that they're doing to change their communities, whether it be inside the legislature or outside of it. Also, as a Demand a Seat graduate myself from earlier this year, and a person with a mom who just joined Moms Demand Action and the AANHPI caucus, it started giving me and my mom some goals for the future and some ideas for what we can do next. Thank you so much, y'all, for such an incredible podcast, an incredible series.
My name is Liz, I'm based in DC, and I just finished listening to episode 5, Do It Afraid. When I phone bank with Everytown's Gun Sense Action Network, I genuinely have to put on a workout t-shirt because I get so nervous about calling people that I sometimes get sweaty while I'm on the phone. This episode made me feel like I'm less alone in that, especially hearing Chantel talk about being nervous about door knocking while she was running for office. The reality is sometimes failure will happen. A door will literally or figuratively close in our faces. Chantel's call to still do it afraid, and Roja's advice to see failure as a benchmark to better our efforts in the future, have inspired me to keep literally rolling up my sleeves and doing my part, even when I'm anxious. Thank you, Kaylin and Nikita, for these conversations. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much for sending in those voice notes. And remember, this podcast is our community. So hit record on your phone and send your stories to us at movementbuilders@everytown.org. Again, it's movementbuilders@everytown.org. And you might just hear yourself on a future episode of the show.
Today's guest has taken her passion for gun safety all the way to City Hall and used the organizing skills she honed in our movement to make her community of Cincinnati, Ohio, safer for every family. Anna Albi is a former Moms Demand Action local group lead and community advocate who now serves on the Cincinnati City Council. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
We're so excited, Anna. Thank you for making the time. I know it's been a busy fall for you already.
I'm here for the Moms Demand Action movement, whatever you need. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much for your time, Anna. We'll just hop right into it. If you could just share with us a little bit about what drew you to the gun violence prevention movement and Moms Demand Action in particular.
You know, I get this question pretty often, and it really came down to every city that I've lived in and every city that I've loved has experienced a mass shooting. So I'm born and raised in Cincinnati. I'm back in Cincinnati now. We had a tragic shooting 6 years ago at downtown at our Fountain Square at Fifth Third Bank. I went to school in Pittsburgh. I lived in the neighborhood of the Tree of Life Synagogue. There was a shooting there. Then I lived in Chicago for 6 years, and it was waking up every morning to news of shootings. And it was this feeling of almost helplessness, of screaming into the void on social media. Why isn't anyone doing anything? Yelling at my local electeds online and knowing they didn't see it and didn't care. And so at some point I Googled, gun safety, group, and Moms Demand Action came up on my browser. And I kind of had heard, this was like 2018-ish timing, had heard a little bit about the work. And at the time I was still in Chicago actually, and signed up to go to a meeting, and just found it so amazing to be in a room with people who care deeply about this issue, who want to make a change and are willing to take action to that. And that's really what drew me in, was having, one, the desire to do something, and two, Moms Demand Action really making it easy to do that, right? Having the framework, having the training, having the resources. So when you talk about how to do advocacy, right, Moms Demand Action was really there to give you the 101 lesson.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've heard from other guests in the podcast so far is just we're experts in this movement and taking people from fed up to fired up, because wringing our hands and wishing it were different doesn't actually move the needle. It doesn't actually change things. And to your point about being angry and feeling frustrated and posting on social media, that's all well and good. But as we all know here, like, we have to take it to the next level and really actually stand up and advocate for the laws that we want to see passed in our communities. So how did serving as your local group lead prepare you for running for office?
Yeah, I think one thing that Moms Demand Action is really good about is coalition building, those relationships. And actually, even today, when I talk to people who are thinking about getting into politics or running someday, I always tell them, like, find the cause you care about and get involved there, because that's going to give you an avenue to, one, build authentic relationships with people. When you are coming to people and you're talking, I actually have this problem. We're not just getting a cup of coffee because I want to meet you for whatever reason. It's, hey, I need gun locks because sadly a 3-year-old died in my neighborhood and I need to get gun locks into my community. Having those real relationship building moments, and then pairing that with, okay, you're going to see how legislation works at every single level, right? Moms Demand Action and frankly, tackling gun violence gives you a really great insight to what is the federal government doing, what's the state government doing, and then what can be done at the city level. I live in Ohio. Ohio, we're a preemption state. And for all our Moms Demand Action volunteers out there who live in preemption states, you know the pain and the struggle of being in a preemption state. So really coming from that space and having to think creatively about, okay, what are the solutions here at our local level, really gave me insight to, okay, what levers can a city council member pull to tackle gun violence? And truly having that training and that approach has been enormously helpful.
I absolutely have to agree with you. This organization changed my life as a volunteer leader for all of the reasons that you just stated. It made me a better advocate and community organizer in particular. If you could just share with us some of the challenges or barriers that women face when you're running for office and how you've actually overcome them. I admire you so much.
Thank you. Well, so I have a lot to say on this one, because I think for every person, it's kind of what your identity is, right? And it's very intersectional, the challenges running for office and every part of your identity you bring. So yes, I'm a woman who ran for office, but I'm also a young woman. I got into the race when I was 30, about to turn 31. And being a newcomer, quote unquote, into politics and being young and being a woman, those all compounded. And I have this really funny interaction of going to a kind of a candidates forum of sorts. And it was at an apartment building where a bunch of seniors live. And so the people in the room were all, God bless them, ladies with gray hair, and totally lovely. But I was chatting with one of them. And at some point she goes, honey, how old are you? And I go, I'm about to turn 31. And she goes, really? I was like, well, how old do you think I am? She's like, you look 22. Well, thank you. And she's like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But you might think about putting some gray in your hair. Some people might want you to look a little older. And in the moment, you laugh it off like, oh, ha. But genuinely, that was a challenge that I had, was to show up to places and speak with authority on topics, specifically around gun violence, to come into the room and say, no, actually, I'm more of an expert in this space and doing the work. So you have to listen to me.
That's right.
I have something to share here, and I can bring leadership skills, even though I'm young and a woman. And that was my experience. Others, women who I know who are running for office, have different challenges, right? How do you balance being a mom with small kids and going to campaign events? That's really hard. Even my husband and I, we had to have some long conversations about how you're going to divvy up the duties at home while I'm on the campaign trail, right? Like, who's walking the dog this night? Who's cleaning up dishes? Are you making, right? And having a really supportive family in terms of that was amazing. My parents are here. My husband's here. And I kind of had to make a trade with my husband. I was like, okay, you don't have to canvas with me. You don't need to knock doors. But if you can make dinner, that'd be really helpful.
Yes.
I think each individual is going to have their own challenges in the space. For me, it was being a woman plus being young, and that coming with people having assumptions about me and me having to kind of prove that I had knowledge and know-how and the intelligence to learn about things that I maybe don't know yet. So that's how I navigated that space. But I think every person listening to this can probably think of the assumptions people have about them and how to overcome those as well.
Absolutely. And I think, what you said was so interesting about this is a policy heavy issue. And I think that sometimes people who don't look like the classic sort of white, middle-aged male politician mold, people assume that they can't tackle these tough issues, that they're good at the sort of softer stuff, quote unquote, but not the actual policy making. And so, for you to be out there and proving them wrong every single day is just incredible. And it's such an inspiration to so many other folks in our movement.
I appreciate it. And I want to share one thing that's interesting about gun violence too, is I think there's so many different spaces and roles you can fill in this movement, right? Yes. I have found my passion being in that policy space of how do you craft policy. We have amazing advocates in Cincinnati where their space is maybe showing up to the scene of a shooting and being there for survivors and helping a bereaved mother heal. We have an amazing team here that works on youth employment, youth mentoring programs, right? So I think too, for me, finding where I fit in that equation, you can't do all of it, right? Like, no one can be a master of all of it. It's a very complex issue. We're all going to find our niche. And so for me too, just being authentically, okay, I'm going to show up and we're going to talk policy, and I'm going to figure out how we can get dollars into this, what things we can do at the local level that the state isn't going to sue us for. We're going to work on those things. But I'm also going to lift up the people who are showing up to the scene of shootings, who are working with survivors, right? So having that coalition, even inside the gun violence space, of understanding everyone's role and how important each of it is and how it fits together.
Yes. In a previous episode of the podcast, we actually spoke with Pastor Jackie Jackson, who has filled that role. Yes. And who's filled that role of being with grieving families as a faith leader and as a gun violence prevention advocate, and also as a survivor of gun violence himself. And you're so right. And that's what makes this movement so strong, is to have people who are doing all of it. Obviously, no one person is doing all of it, but together collectively, we're doing all of it. And there's so much power in that. We had our first Smart Week in August. I know Be Smart is something that you're very passionate about, to raise awareness about the life-saving importance of secure firearm storage. And you're doing really innovative work in that regard with your local law enforcement agency as well as public libraries, which is so creative. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I should say, back to living in Ohio, right? The state sues us for a lot of things, but something that we can agree on across the board is locking up your guns. Most people are on board with that, right? It's a solution that we can really find agreement around. So coming into City Hall, you have lots of meetings with various groups. So fun fact, on day one, all of a sudden your email explodes and it's all these people wanting to set up times to get to know you. And the library is one of those groups, and I'm a communicator by trade. So I was like, yes, library, let's go. And in the conversation, we're talking about various things, and it became very clear the library is really a doorway into the community, right? It's a
Yes.
community hub. It's a place where people of all ages can go find resources they need, feel safe, and have that connection, right? And so in the conversation, we were talking about, okay, what resources can we put into the library? And I think it was actually Paulo on the library team was like, well, I know you've been doing a lot of stuff about gun locks. We would do that. I was like, awesome, let's do it. So I'm lucky enough that I had pre-existing relationship through Moms Demand Action with our sheriff's office that provides our local group gun locks, obviously our Be Smart volunteers in Cincinnati and our Cincinnati Police Department. So within weeks, we were able to get gun locks out to, at first it was every library in the city of Cincinnati. And I followed up, every library. And then I followed up with the sheriff's office across the county. I said, hey, we actually want to do this whole county. And they're like, great, tell us how many locks you need. So now we've got gun locks in every single library across Hamilton County. So we've been doing this program since April of this year. And the libraries have distributed 235 gun locks. That's 105 in the city and 130 across the county. And we have gun locks, not just the CPD and the sheriffs, our local VA has offered to provide gun locks. Sheriffs and other counties have. This has truly become a doorway, pathway for getting to our citizens and responsible gun owners to get gun locks out into the community.
Oh my gosh, you're such a trailblazer. I am now I am going to talk to my local group about getting some gun locks into the libraries.
Yeah. And shout out to our Be Smart team. I called up Sandra, who's amazing. And I said, hey, I need gun locks now. And she's like, come on over. You can have all the ones I have. Gave me all the ones. And she gave me a stack of hundreds of Be Smart lit. So I took those little kind of postcards that we had for Be Smart, took that to the library. So now we get the lock plus information about Be Smart.
That's amazing. Yes. Libraries are such a sort of central part of community. I live in Jersey City, and our libraries here aren't just where people come to read. It's where people come to gather, can have computer access. People come and meet, different groups have meetings. And so just meeting people where they are is such a brilliant idea because this is already a gathering place. You don't have to reinvent the wheel of where do people gather. Same thing with the VA. People are already coming in for services. People are already coming in to access their health care. And here you're providing another service. You're providing another safety service. It's amazing. What a great idea. I want to do that in Jersey City too.
Yeah, please. And we're the model and we've only gotten good responses. People have been so responsive. I think too, our police, law enforcement partners have been awesome about gun locks. But not everyone wants to go into a police department, into the office there and get a gun lock. And libraries really offer that judgment-free space. And I'll say too, I want to give one more shout out around gun locks to our Cincinnati Children's Hospital. They've also been doing amazing work. And we've had a chance to partner with them around talking to parents during pediatrician visits around secure firearm storage. And we'll be funding through the city, making sure they get gun locks as well, that they can be handing out to parents in the moment as they're talking about secure storage.
Thank you so much. That just lit up my whole day.
I love it.
So much of our work to elect gun sense candidates and change policies around this issue are at the local, state, and federal levels. And it requires us to work with people from all different backgrounds just so we can find some common ground. How have you done this as a community organizer and now as a city council member? You are the people's champ. You work for all the people.
I love this so much because, I think gun violence and tackling gun legislation is really kind of the most concentrated version of this in America. And I have a lot to say on that. But we in Cincinnati, it's interesting because we are surrounded by more conservative areas. So our local group will do a table at this fair that's right outside the city. It's kind of on the border and it's got a much more rural pool. And we go there every year. And inevitably, there are typically men who wearing their Second Amendment shirts who spot us and want to come over and engage us in a conversation. And for me, it's really finding that lowest denominator that we can agree on. And typically I lead with secure storage, right?
Yes.
Oh, you're a gun owner? Oh, I see your wife and your child are here. Let's talk about making sure your firearms are safe while your kid's in the house. Or, hey, your kid's going over for play dates. Are you checking to see if the parents of that play date, if they have guns and if the guns are securely stored, right? And you really can relate at that lowest denominator, I don't need to talk about the other things I want to work on, right?
That's right.
I don't have to. But if we can agree on that much, that's something. And, at that fair, I've had a series of interesting experiences, including, again, a gentleman in a Second Amendment shirt who came up and was very confrontational. But by the end of it, we shook hands and I was like, all right, thanks for locking up your guns. We also had another one where the booth next to us, I forget exactly what the woman was selling, but her husband came to help her out one day in a Second Amendment shirt. And he was very bashful about being next to us. But he and I had a great conversation for him as a gun owner, talking about there being gun shows in Cincinnati or kind of the outskirts. And he said to me, you watch 2 weeks after that Sharonville gun show, you'll see shootings go up. Watch it. And sure enough, I started kind of tracking that. And it was just such a moment where he was able to see that as a gun owner and someone who clearly supported his rights to do that. But he was also saying, like, that's insane. That's not how it should be. Like, we need to talk about secure storage, talk about people getting training. Like, a lot of gun owners I speak with really push okay, we need to teach people how to use their guns. And sadly, Ohio doesn't have any of those requirements. You don't need to get a permit here anymore, right? But most gun owners I speak with are like, yeah, I had to get my permit. I had to get my concealed weapons license. Like, everyone should do it. And I think just finding those points of agreement is really where you start. And especially in a state like Ohio, go in with a reasonable ask, something that's achievable, build to that, and then, check it off in that win column.
And I think you're so right. And I also think that we can be so polarized sort of from the top down, right? Yeah. But the actual interaction on the small level of a person to person, even if they're wearing a Second Amendment shirt and sitting next to a Moms Demand Action booth, just taking it down to that person to person level is so powerful. And we can get more done that way. And one of the things our volunteers are out there doing this fall is relational organizing, as really having those one-on-one conversations with friends, family members, neighbors, a fellow parent on the sidelines of the soccer game that makes coffee in the morning with you, whatever the case may be. And, talk a little bit about, in your opinion, the power of that kind of relational organizing to actually find common ground.
I think that's exactly right. And it's interesting, even while you're talking about that, I was thinking about me taking office the first couple months. When you campaign on gun violence prevention, again, people come in with assumptions sometimes of what that means, what you're looking to do. And I had a gentleman, we were at kind of a community event where there were lots of tables, and he does kind of a mental health thing for, I think specifically for Black men, is like he's trying to get them to talk more and provide those resources. And he pulled me aside. He was like, hey, what you're doing around the gun locks is really good. It's really good that you came in first and you provided gun locks rather than trying to villainize gun owners. Like, that is really good. I'm glad you did that.
Yes.
So again, meeting people where they are, being realistic in certain states, not villainizing individual gun owners, but as Moms Demand Action talks a lot about, is talking about the gun industry and the impact, right? And what that means for our politics, and not it necessarily being each individual. So I think that's been really, really important.
And we all know, let's just be honest, political change can sometimes not happen as quickly as we would like for it to. I remember joining this movement and hearing Shannon Watts say, this is a marathon and not a sprint, right? And we also know at the same time that we cannot stop, right? We have to keep going and keep the momentum of the work up. And we have to take care of ourselves. So we honor self-care in this space and all spaces in this work. And we would like for you to share with us, how do you keep going when it gets hard? How do you take care of yourself?
I have some self-care things. I'm a big tennis player. I like to spend time with my husband and my dog, going hiking. But I think for me, what's really keeps me going is counting every small win. You've heard me talk about that throughout. Is really just keeping track. And when I was local lead, I kept a spreadsheet of everything that we accomplished as a local group. So at the end of the quarter or during meetings, I could go back and say, hey, we did this, this, and this. And I want to brag on our local volunteers here in Cincinnati. I want to rattle off some of the things we were able to get accomplished. We were able to pass through our Cincinnati public schools a secure firearm storage resolution. So now the families of 36,000 kids in Cincinnati get a letter at the beginning of the year that has Be Smart information written by our amazing volunteer, Sandra. We have been able to get mayoral proclamations for Wear Orange, Light Up the Skies. Cincinnati City Council, even before I was on it, declaring gun violence a public health crisis. We had articles going out about our work that we're doing, how to get involved. We're hosting Be Smart sessions. We're supporting our local pediatricians and the work they're doing around talking to parents around secure storage. And we are still fighting for gun legislation alongside Moms Demand Action, doing what we can despite the state. And so really counting those wins. And I'm really grateful, since being on city council, I've had a couple small progressive wins here. So one of them is the gun locks in libraries, which we talked about.
Yes.
Also, Cincinnati is a very bizarre city in many ways. And one of them was that we used to own a railroad, and we sold that railroad last year, which means we now have a ton of money that needs to be invested. And coming in this year, I called up the person who's going to be in charge of making those decisions. And I said, hey, as we invest this money, let's not invest into firearms. We don't want to invest into an industry that is killing our citizens. And sure enough, with a couple conversations, we were able to do that. So now this big kind of trust fund the city has is not going to be actively investing into firearms. And I think that matters.
Yeah,
that is so powerful.
I think it matters. And it's funny, I had someone kind of in a business meeting kind of push back and be like, well, should we be dictating how we invest all our dollars? I was like, no. I'm not trying to, I've got thoughts, but I'm not trying to be there watching every dime for the investment. I'm not an investment banker. But we are talking about an industry that is killing hundreds of Cincinnatians every year. Why would we give them our money? Why? So that's been an amazing small win. I went into our budget for this year with some very specific asks. And through it, I was able to assure funding for an additional full-time worker for our Victims Assistance Liaison Unit. So those are group of social workers within our Cincinnati Police that work with every survivor of gun violence to provide mental health counseling, support as they go through the court systems and legal process, and do just really amazing work. Shout out to Karen Rumsey, who is a saint among mere women, mere mortals. And we also, through that budget, were able to also provide additional funding for our alternative response to crisis team. So we in Cincinnati first piloted and now have it as a permanent program where if someone calls and it's a non-violent issue, specifically around mental health, we send a mental health professional along with a paramedic to respond to that scene rather than an officer with a gun where things might escalate. And I see that as a really important violence deterrence strategy as well.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to my city hall meeting on Monday, and we are actually addressing some of what you just mentioned. And I am like, I got some ideas from Anna.
Yeah. And that's what I feel like Moms Demand Action really taught me to think about, okay, we've got different layers of government. How do you work the system at the local level? Like, what does systemic change look like at the local level? And I'm really proud too, the city of Cincinnati, even before I was on, but I'm 1,000 times behind it. We're launching our very first hospital-based violence intervention program.
Yes.
So Cincinnati Children's and our University of Cincinnati Medical Center. So now anyone who comes in with a gunshot injury between ages of 0 to 44 is going to get paired with a violence prevention professional for 6 to 12 months. And that person's going to help those survivors with food accidents, housing, mental health, addiction treatment, whatever those wraparound services and needs are to make sure we're really taking care of our survivors.
That is amazing. And it made me think about the CVI funding that is utilized across the country, in particular at the local level, to support a lot of the work that Credible Messengers do as well.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you all have some of that money tucked away, and you've advocated for that too. That's amazing.
So you've talked to Pastor Jackie. He is an amazing advocate, survivor, credible messenger who's been really leading this fight here in Cincinnati. And he's got many other colleagues in that space. And the city has been very, very supportive and grateful for that work. And we continue to invest in those relationships and the vital work that they do.
Yes.
That's awesome. And just meeting people with those wraparound services, realizing that there are root causes of violence. And when we're talking about under-resourced and underinvested in communities, particularly communities of color, particularly Black and Latinx communities, it's not enough to just say, we're going to work on this one little issue as if it exists in a vacuum. We have to look at it in this holistic way. And it sounds like the work here.
Absolutely.
We know that the path forward is not always really clear or straight. We sometimes have wins and then a couple steps back. And sometimes when the door closes in our face, go through the window. But In your own journey from organizer to city council member, is there anything you wish you'd known? Anything you'd go back and tell your previous self? And any advice you'd give to our other movement builders who are maybe considering taking the leap and running for public office or stepping into a bigger role in their community, whatever that might be?
I think first off, I wish I would have gotten involved sooner, right? I wish I would have found a Moms Demand Action sooner and really jumped in. And obviously people listening to this have already taken that step. So maybe that's not needed advice here. But my college interns over the summer, I said, find that issue. It doesn't have to be gun violence. It could be the environment. It could be some other kind of issue across the nation that you're interested in, just finding that group to truly understand how to advocate, how to build coalitions, how to follow legislation through the process. That's something we Moms Demand Action volunteers have to do. We have to keep our eye on those
That's right.
pesky bills, especially at the state level in Ohio. So I think jumping in earlier and really kind of embracing that work is something I wish I would have done, but I'm happy with where I'm at. So forgive myself of that guilt. I think in terms of people who are looking to run for office the first time and make that leap, for me, what helped kind of get me to that place was I had an amazing day job. I was working as a communications professional. I loved my work, loved my team, but still the thing that was keeping me up to midnight and that I was working on was Moms Demand Action. That was the thing where I woke up and I was fired up to do that. Like that was the thing that, at the end of the day, I was like, oh, that was great. Like, let's do it again. And to me, it was like, okay, at some point, that thing I'm doing on the side of my desk, I want that to take up my whole desk.
Right.
And that was what helped push me into, okay, the timing's right. And I had some great opportunities where City Hall, even before I was there, was embracing the work Moms Demand Action was doing, inviting us in. And it was really helping me think through, okay, how do I be a part of this? How do I take on systems changes? I think that was my story. I do have some pieces of advice for first-time candidates. First off, the Mandacy program was great. I think coming out of that, something to really hone in on is around the how to tell your story. And how, especially if you're running for office for the first time and you don't have the kind of like, well, I was a council aide and I did that, all those generic kind of politics resume builders, and you're coming in as someone who's done a different profession. How do you tell the story of why this matters and the work you've been doing? So come up with that 2-minute stump speech. 2 minutes, it's tough. But in that 2 minutes, don't spend as much time talking about your biography. Talk about the work. Tell the story about how what you did make a difference, right? So one of my stories that I told, and it's a sad story, was in my neighborhood, a 3-year-old was shot and killed when their sibling picked up a loaded gun on the table.
Oh my goodness.
And after that, I reached out to our sheriff's office and we got gun locks, and we distributed over 100 gun locks the week following that into the neighborhood along with Be Smart materials. And that was my way of getting into, okay, this is why this matters. We have bad gun laws at the state level, which means that people can get guns, no background checks, no permit, no questions asked, no training, and they're leaving them out, and it's costing kids lives. Now let me talk about how gun violence is impacting our Cincinnati community and be able to tell that story of why it matters and tie it into that bigger picture of whatever office you're running for, right? I was running for the city. So safer communities means that people are being paid enough to have a roof over their head, fresh food on the table, access to healthcare, and that we as a city are investing into our community programs, right? That was how I got to that point. But being able to tell that story about yourself, how you've taken action, how it's made an impact, and why the work you're doing around gun violence really impacts the community.
Yes. And I don't know if you've been checking the Demand Action app, but we literally have 100 ways to take action between now and Election Day. And one of them was honing your elevator pitch, honing your story. As you said, 2 minutes is not a long time, but sometimes it's all you have to convince somebody to have a deeper conversation and take that action. And I love telling the story of the work and the victories, because people can also feel discouraged sometimes. And when you talk about tangible ways you've made a difference, it can make people feel hopeful again. It can take them from the place of fed up and feeling despair to fed up and ready to work.
Yeah. And everyone who's in Moms Demand Action, especially the leads, right? These are the helpers in the community. And ultimately, when you're running for office, you're running to be a servant of the community. You're running to be a helper, right? So that is the story you've got to tell. And that's going to matter more than whatever's on your resume. It's telling the stories of how you're going to help and serve the community.
Thank you, Anna. I feel fired up from talking to you,
Me
Nikita.
too.
This was amazing. We are so grateful to have you on the show. We know that you're busy and hard at work on the city council. So as we said in the Demand Action app, we've got 100 days and 100 ways to take action to elect gun sense candidates like Anna, many of whom come from our movement. So let's get out the vote, y'all, for the gun sense candidates who are going to really do what it takes to save lives in our communities. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much.
I love Moms Demand Action. Thank you for everything you're doing.
I loved hearing Anna talk about the ways she pushes this work forward in her community. As she said, Anna was part of Demand-a-Seat, an Everytown Victory Fund program that empowers Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action volunteers to run for office and to learn how to run campaigns by giving them the tools that they need to succeed.
It's so inspiring to me to see people from our movement step into those roles. And I loved what Anna said about the thing on the side of her desk, Moms Demand Action, and the volunteer work she was doing, wanting to move it to the center of her desk. And now she does that as a city council member. I thought it was amazing. And just talking to her left me feeling so inspired. Y'all, we hope you found Anna's story as inspiring as we did. It takes real courage and leadership to run for office and demand that seat at the decision-making table, especially when politics can feel so polarized right now. But you don't have to run for office to make an impact this election. There's so many ways to get involved, large and small. No matter how much time you have, no matter what you have to give, there's a place for you here. And we know that supporting our local gun sense candidates from home is just as important. So please keep checking out the app for our 100 Days, 100 Ways challenges. Sign up for a phone bank with the Gun Sense Action Network. Join a weekend of action event in your community and keep having those one-on-one gun sense voter conversations with everyone you can, because all of it matters and all of it is moving us forward. And thanks for listening to Movement Builders. We've loved hearing your stories and we're excited to bring more episodes of the podcast to you. I'm Kaylin Ford.
And I'm Nikita. Thank you for all that you do to save lives. It's working.